Marcus Chen pressed his face against the viewport of the orbital station, watching the massive Galactic Council ships dock with practiced precision. Each vessel represented a different species, their hulls gleaming with technologies that made human engineering look primitive by comparison. The Zephyrian ships moved like liquid metal, their surfaces rippling with energy fields. The Krillian dreadnoughts bristled with weapons that could crack planets. The elegant Asterian cruisers seemed to bend space around them as they glided into position. And then there was the human shuttle. Small, battered, held together with polymer patches and desperate hope. It looked like a child's toy next to the galactic superpowers. "Look at that rust bucket," chittered Vexhal, a insectoid Krillian whose translator made his voice sound like grinding metal. "How did such a primitive species even manage to reach space?" "Barely, from the looks of it," rumbled Thane Korthak, the massive Zephyrian ambassador. His crystalline skin reflected the station's lights as he gestured dismissively at the human vessel. Their entire civilization achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 cycles ago. Most species master interstellar flight within 10 cycles of discovering fire. Marcus turned away from the viewport, his jaw clenched. He had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times since humanity had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Always the same mockery, the same dismissive laughter, the same assumption that humans were nothing more than uplifted animals who had stumbled into the stars through sheer luck. The other species representatives gathered in the station's central hub, their various forms creating an impressive display of galactic diversity. The ethereal Asteri floated in containment suits filled with their native atmosphere, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing with what Marcus had learned was amusement. The reptilian Vorthak delegation stood in perfect military formation, their scaled hides bearing the scars of countless battles. The plant-like Thornari swayed gently, their photosynthetic fronds absorbing the station's artificial light. And in the middle of it all stood Marcus, the sole human representative. At 28 years old, he was young for a diplomatic position, but humanity's limited resources meant they could only afford to send one delegate to most council meetings. His simple black suit looked shabby compared to the ornate ceremonial garments and biotechnological enhancements of the other delegates. "Ah, the human arrives," announced High Chancellor Zerthok, the ancient Asterian who served as the council's ceremonial leader. His voice resonated through his containment suit's speakers with barely concealed condescension. "We were just discussing the proposed mining rights for the Kepler 442 system. I trust Earth has prepared its, humble contribution to the discussion." Marcus straightened his shoulders and activated his data pad. Earth survey teams have identified 17 potentially habitable worlds in the Kepler 442 system, along with asteroid fields rich in rare minerals. We're prepared to offer detailed geological surveys in exchange for a 15% stake in any mining operations. The chamber erupted in what Marcus had learned to recognize as laughter among the various species. The Krillians clicked their mandibles rapidly, the Zephyrians' crystalline bodies chimed like broken bells, and the Asteri pulsed in synchronized patterns of mocking blue light. 15%? Vexhal's translator couldn't quite convey his incredulous tone, but his body language was clear enough. "Your species hasn't even mapped your own solar system completely. What could you possibly offer that we cannot acquire with infinitely more efficiency? Human survey techniques are quaint," added Commander Thys of the Vorthak delegation, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "But their equipment is centuries behind our capabilities. Why would we accept inferior data when our own sensor arrays can penetrate planetary cores from orbit?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but forced his voice to remain steady. "Human survey teams conduct detailed surface analysis that automated scans often miss. We've discovered mineral deposits that orbital sensors failed to detect. On one world." Thane Korthak's rumbling voice carried clear skepticism. "A statistical anomaly hardly proves systematic superiority." The debate continued for hours, with Marcus finding himself defending humanity's right to even participate in the discussion. Every proposal he made was met with dismissive counter-arguments. Every piece of evidence he presented was explained away as luck or accident. By the time the session ended, Humanity had been allocated a token 2% stake in any future mining operations. And even that felt like charity. As the other delegates filed out of the chamber, their conversations turning to matters too important for human participation, Marcus remained in his seat, staring at his datapad. 3 years of this, 3 years of being treated like a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Rough session? Marcus looked up to find Dr. Yara Okafor, the station's human cultural attaché, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. She was one of only 3 other humans on the station, and the only one who understood what these diplomatic sessions were really like. They offered us 2%, Marcus said, accepting the coffee gratefully, and made it clear they considered that generous. Yara settled into the seat beside him, her expression sympathetic but unsurprised. You know what they call us in the station's administrative files? Marcus raised an eyebrow. The charity case, she said. That's our official designation. Not humanity, or Earth representatives, or even Terran delegation. We're listed as the charity case. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. How do you know that? I have access to the filing systems for cultural documentation purposes. Yara's voice was carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the anger in her eyes. Marcus, there's something else. Something I probably shouldn't tell you. What is it? Yara glanced around the empty chamber, then leaned closer. There's been talk among the other delegates about reviewing humanity's provisional membership status. Some of the species representatives think we're taking up space that could be better used. What kind of talk? The kind that happens in private meetings we're not invited to. Yara's hands tightened around her coffee cup. The Krillians have been particularly vocal about it. They think humanity should be reclassified as a developing species and have our voting rights suspended indefinitely. Marcus stared at her, processing the implications. Without voting rights, humanity would be effectively excluded from all major galactic decisions. They would become observers at best, ignored at worst. How long do we have? The review is scheduled for next quarter, Yara said. Unless something dramatic changes. Unless humanity can prove we belong here. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. I need to get back to Earth. There are some calls I need to make. Marcus, what are you thinking? He turned to look at her, and Yara was surprised by the intensity in his eyes. I'm thinking it's time to remind the galaxy that humans didn't reach the stars by accident. That night, Marcus sent a coded message through humanity's secure communication network. The message was brief, containing only a set of coordinates and a single word. Home. Within hours, responses began arriving from across human space. Some came from civilian mining operations in the outer systems. Others originated from research stations on the edge of explored space. A few carried the subtle signatures that indicated military origin, though officially humanity had no military presence in contested regions. Each response contained the same simple acknowledgement. Understood. Dr. Sarah Martinez was conducting routine atmospheric analysis on Kepler 442b when her equipment detected the anomaly. Deep in the planet's crust, buried beneath kilometers of rock and metal, was a structure that definitely wasn't natural. The geometric precision was too perfect, the material composition too uniform, the energy signatures too organized. This can't be right, she muttered, running the scan for the 3rd time. The results remained unchanged. Whatever was down there had been built, not formed by geological processes. Her comm unit chirped with an incoming message from the survey team's leader, Captain Rodriguez. Martinez, you need to see this. We've found something. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood at the edge of what could only be described as ruins. Ancient structures rose from the planetary surface like broken teeth, their surfaces covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The architecture was simultaneously familiar and alien, as if designed by minds that understood space and dimension in ways human perception couldn't quite grasp. How old do you think this is? Asked Dr. Kim, the team's xenoarchaeologist. Sarah consulted her readings. Based on isotope decay and crystallization patterns, at least 50,000 years. Maybe more. 50,000 years, Rodriguez repeated slowly. That predates every known galactic civilization by millennia. Not every civilization, Sarah said quietly. According to the galactic databases, there are references to a species called the predecessors. They supposedly vanished around that time frame, leaving only fragments and legends behind. Kim's eyes widened. You think this is a predecessor site? I think this is exactly what the council representative said didn't exist, Sarah replied. They claimed human survey techniques were primitive, that we couldn't find anything their sensors couldn't detect. But here we are, standing in front of something that should have shown up on every deep space scan ever conducted of this system. Rodriguez activated his comm unit. Base camp, this is Rodriguez. We need to accelerate our timeline. And get me a secure channel to Earth Command. The message that reached Marcus 3 days later was encrypted with protocols that officially didn't exist. The content was brief but electrifying. Package located. Authenticity confirmed. Extraction proceeding. Similar reports began arriving from survey teams across the Kepler 442 system. Ancient technology caches buried in asteroid cores. Derelict facilities hidden in planetary ring systems. Artifacts that had been overlooked by decades of automated scanning because they had been designed to be invisible to conventional sensors. And in every case, it was human survey teams that found them. Not because human technology was superior, but because human survey techniques involved something the other galactic species had forgotten. Actually going places and looking around with their own eyes. Marcus smiled as he read the reports. For 3 years, humanity had been mocked for their primitive, hands-on approach to exploration. For 3 years, they had been told that personal reconnaissance was inefficient, that automated systems were superior in every way. The other species were about to learn why the primitive human approach had gotten them to the stars in the first place. But Marcus's smile faded as he read the final report in the batch. This one came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the survey team exploring the system's outermost planet. Marcus, you need to see this. What we found here, it changes everything. And I mean everything. The attached files contained images that made Marcus's hands shake as he scrolled through them. Ancient star maps showing the locations of every major galactic civilization. Technological schematics that made current galactic technology look like stone tools. And most importantly, records written in a script that was somehow impossibly familiar. Because the symbols carved into the walls of that ancient facility weren't completely alien. They were the ancestors of human writing. Recognizable to anyone who had studied the evolution of Earth's languages. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The predecessors hadn't just vanished 50,000 years ago. They had hidden. And somehow, impossibly, they had hidden on Earth. Humanity wasn't just another species that had stumbled into space. They were the descendants of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. The same civilization that had built the ruins scattered across Kepler 442. The same civilization that every other galactic species told legends about but insisted were just myths. Marcus began typing a new message, this one destined for the survey teams, still in the Kepler 442 system. The message was longer than his usual communications, containing detailed instructions and a warning about the importance of discretion, because humanity wasn't ready to reveal what they had discovered. Not yet. First, they needed to understand what it meant. They needed to learn what their ancestors had built, and why they had abandoned it. And most importantly, they needed to decide what to do with the knowledge that humanity wasn't just another member of the galactic community. They were its founders. 6 months after the discovery in the Kepler 442 system, Marcus stood in a secret facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice. The chamber around him hummed with energy that shouldn't exist according to known physics, powered by technology that made the most advanced galactic systems look primitive. Dr. Elena Vasquez moved through the ancient control room with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing over interfaces that responded to human touch in ways they never had for any other species. Banks of holographic displays showed star maps spanning the entire galaxy, with thousands of markers indicating hidden predecessor facilities. The pattern is becoming clear, Elena said, manipulating the 3-dimensional display to focus on specific regions. Every major galactic civilization built their homeworlds near dormant predecessor sites. The Krillian homeworld sits directly on top of a massive underground complex. The Zephyrian crystal formations that give them their technology are actually fossilized predecessor biocircuits. Marcus studied the display with growing amazement. They're all living on our ancestors' leftovers? It's more than that, said Dr. James Wright, the facility's lead xenoarchaeologist. He gestured to another set of displays showing technological analyses. Every piece of advanced technology the galactic species claim as their own innovations can be traced back to predecessor artifacts they've found and reverse engineered. Faster than light travel, energy shields, matter conversion. It's all based on incomplete understanding of our technology. The implications were staggering. For centuries, the galactic species had been building their civilizations on the remnants of humanity's ancestors, slowly piecing together fragments of knowledge while believing themselves to be the galaxy's most advanced beings. But why did the predecessors abandon all this? Marcus asked. Why hide on Earth and let their technology scatter across the galaxy? Elena's expression grew somber. We found records in the deepest levels of the Kepler facility. Marcus, our ancestors didn't abandon their technology by choice. They were running from something. She manipulated the display to show a different set of star maps, these marked with dates and trajectory analyses. 50,000 years ago, something came from outside the galaxy. The records call it the Void Hunger, an intelligence that consumed entire star systems, converting matter and energy into something else entirely. The display showed system after system going dark, a spreading wave of destruction that had swept across the galaxy's outer rim toward its center. The predecessors realized they couldn't fight it conventionally, Wright continued. Their technology was impressive, but this thing adapted to everything they threw at it. So they tried a different approach. They hid, Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn. They scattered, Elena corrected. Small groups spread across the galaxy, taking refuge on primitive worlds where the void hunger was unlikely to look. They abandoned their great cities and their vast technologies, becoming simple colonists on backwater planets, including Earth. Elena's voice was quiet. And they programmed their facilities to remain dormant until their descendants were ready to reclaim them. But only their true descendants, only beings with the right genetic markers, could activate the systems. Marcus looked around the ancient chamber with new understanding. The technology hadn't responded to the other galactic species because it was never meant to. It had been waiting for humans to evolve, to develop space travel, to come home. There's something else, Wright said, his expression troubled. The void hunger didn't just disappear. It's still out there. Somewhere in the space between galaxies, and according to the deepest predecessor archives, it's cyclical. It returns every 50,000 years to continue its consumption. Marcus felt cold settle into his bones. How long do we have? Elena checked her readings. Based on the cyclical patterns and astronomical observations, the next incursion should begin within the next 5 years. Maybe less. The weight of the revelations settled over the chamber like a physical presence. Humanity had spent 3 years being mocked as primitive newcomers to galactic civilization, never knowing that they were the descendants of the galaxy's founders. And now they faced the possibility that everything their ancestors had built, everything the current galactic species had achieved, was about to be consumed by an intelligence that had been waiting in the dark between stars. What do the records say about fighting it? Marcus asked. Wright pulled up another set of displays, showing weapon schematics and defensive configurations that hurt to look at directly. The predecessors tried everything conventional warfare could offer: antimatter weapons, gravitational manipulators, stellar engineering. Nothing worked permanently. The void hunger adapted to every strategy, but they had one plan they never implemented, Elena added. Something they called the final gambit. The records are fragmentary, but it seems to involve activating every dormant facility simultaneously and channeling their combined power into something called the Genesis Protocol. Marcus studied the partial schematics, trying to understand technologies that exceeded human comprehension by orders of magnitude. What would that do? Near as we can tell, it would fundamentally alter the physics of local space-time, Wright said. Make the galaxy uninhabitable for the void hunger, while preserving existing life. But the power requirements are enormous, and it would require coordination between every major world in the galaxy, including the worlds where the other galactic species live, Marcus realized. The same species that think we're primitive charity cases. Elena nodded grimly. The same species that have been unknowingly living on top of the activation points for our ancestors' final weapon. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the enormity of what they faced. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, despite the magnitude of the situation. How long would it take to activate the human-controlled facilities? With our current understanding, years, Elena replied. The systems are incredibly complex, and we're still learning how they work. But Marcus, even if we could activate them all tomorrow, it wouldn't be enough. The Genesis protocol requires activation from sites across the entire galaxy, including worlds we can't access. Worlds controlled by species that dismiss us as irrelevant, Wright added. Species that would never believe a human warning about an ancient threat they've never heard of. Marcus began pacing the chamber, his mind working through possibilities and obstacles. What if we didn't tell them it was a human discovery? Elena and Wright exchanged glances. What do you mean? The other species respect archaeological discovery. They compete over ancient artifacts and lost technologies. What if we arranged for them to discover predecessor sites on their own worlds? Guided them to the right conclusions without revealing our involvement? That would require incredible coordination, Wright said slowly. We'd need to plant evidence, manipulate their research, guide their investigations toward specific conclusions. And we'd need to do it across dozens of worlds simultaneously, Elena added. Any delay or discovery of our involvement would destroy the entire plan. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face them. How many humans are working in the galactic archaeological community? Elena consulted her datapad. Several hundred, spread across various institutions and research teams. Most of them are considered junior researchers or technical support staff. Perfect, Marcus said with a grim smile. Nobody pays attention to junior researchers. They can access sites, plant evidence, guide investigations, all while being completely invisible to the senior staff who make the real decisions. It's insanely risky, Wright warned. If even one species discovers what we're doing, they'll assume we're trying to deceive them for political gain. It could destroy humanity's standing in the galactic community entirely. And if we don't try, the void hunger will destroy the galactic community entirely, Marcus replied, along with every living being in this galaxy. Over the next 3 hours, they developed the outline of the most ambitious deception in galactic history. Human researchers would gradually guide their alien colleagues toward discovering predecessor sites on their own worlds. The discoveries would appear to be natural archaeological progression, with each species believing they had found evidence of ancient technology through their own superior methods. Meanwhile, humanity would work to understand and prepare their own facilities for eventual activation. When the time came to warn the galaxy about the approaching threat, the evidence would already be in place. The other species would have their own archaeological proof of the predecessor's existence and the reality of the void hunger. There's one more thing, Elena said as they finalized their plans. The human teams in Kepler 442 have found something else. Another type of facility, much smaller than the others but apparently designed for rapid activation. She brought up new schematics, showing compact installations with streamlined control systems. We think these are early warning stations, she continued, designed to detect the void hunger's approach and coordinate the galaxy-wide response. The good news is that they're simpler to activate than the main facilities. The bad news is that they're also more detectable once online. Marcus studied the designs. How many of these stations do we control? 17 confirmed, possibly more. But Marcus, once we activate them, we won't be able to hide our involvement anymore. The energy signatures are too distinctive, and the other species will definitely notice. Then we make sure we don't activate them until we're ready for everything else, Marcus decided. How long do you think it will take to set up the archaeological discoveries? Wright ran calculations on his data pad. If we start immediately and coordinate carefully, maybe 18 months to get all the major species investigating their local sites. Another 6 months for them to reach the conclusions we need them to reach. 2 years, Marcus said. We have 2 years to convince the galaxy that an ancient threat is returning, and that their only hope of survival requires trusting the species they've spent 3 years treating as primitive newcomers. Elena looked at the vast displays, showing the locations of dormant facilities scattered across the galaxy. Marcus, even if this works perfectly, even if every species accepts the evidence and agrees to cooperate, we're still betting everything on technology we barely understand. True, Marcus acknowledged, but the alternative is waiting for the void hunger to return and hoping someone else figures out a solution. What if the predecessors were wrong? Wright asked quietly. What if the Genesis protocol doesn't work? Or what if activating it destroys the galaxy instead of saving it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking around the ancient chamber that had been waiting 50,000 years for humanity to come home. Then we'll face that decision when we come to it, he said finally. Right now, our choice is simple. We can either prepare to fight with the weapons our ancestors left us, or we can sit back and wait for extinction. He turned to face Elena and Wright, his expression resolute. Send the activation codes to every human researcher in the galactic archaeological community. It's time to start planting seeds. As the ancient facility hummed with increasing activity around them, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what their predecessor ancestors would think of their descendants' plan. Would they approve of the deception, the careful manipulation required to unite the galaxy against an approaching threat? Or would they recognize it as exactly the kind of desperate, innovative thinking that had allowed humans to survive and spread across the stars in the first place? 3 days later, Dr. Sarah Chen, a junior researcher on the Krillian homeworld, made a surprising discovery in the planet's northern excavation site. Her excited report to the Krillian Archaeological Authority described finding technology that seemed impossibly advanced, possibly predating all known galactic civilizations. Similar discoveries began occurring across the galaxy with remarkable frequency over the following weeks. Each one appeared to be the result of dedicated research and careful analysis by the host species' own scientists, guided by helpful human assistants who seemed to have an unusual talent for spotting anomalies in scanning data. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had no idea they were being led back to their own forgotten foundations by the descendants of the people who had built them. 18 months after the archaeological deception began, Marcus stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, but this time the atmosphere was dramatically different. Instead of condescending smirks and dismissive chittering, he faced expressions of confusion, concern, and growing alarm from representatives who had spent the past year and a half making discoveries that challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic history. High Chancellor Zerthok's containment suit pulsed with agitated bioluminescent patterns as he addressed the assembly. The evidence presented by our respective archaeological teams is disturbing. Each of our civilizations has uncovered structures and technologies that predate our own development by millennia. The implications are staggering. Commander Thys of the Vorthak delegation spoke next, her scarred hide bearing fresh ritual markings that indicated serious concern among her people. The installations discovered on Vorthak Prime contained star maps showing the locations of every major civilization in the galaxy. They knew where we would develop before we even achieved sentience. The crystalline matrices found beneath New Zephyr are not natural formations as we previously believed, rumbled Thane Korthak. They are technological constructs of impossible sophistication. Our entire energy infrastructure is built on foundations we did not create. Vex Hal's mandibles clicked rapidly in patterns Marcus had learned indicated extreme agitation. The Krillian deep excavations have revealed layer upon layer of technology that makes our most advanced systems appear primitive. Whoever built these installations possessed capabilities that exceed our understanding of physics itself. Marcus listened to each report with carefully concealed satisfaction. Over the past 18 months, human researchers embedded within each civilization's archaeological programs had guided their alien colleagues to precisely these conclusions. Every discovery had been orchestrated. every breakthrough carefully planned to build toward this moment. The pattern is clear across all our worlds, continued High Chancellor Zerthok. An ancient civilization of unprecedented advancement preceded all of our species. The archaeological evidence suggests they called themselves the predecessors, and their technology formed the foundation for everything we consider our greatest achievements. Marcus stood slowly, drawing the attention of the assembly. For the first time since humanity had joined the council, he could feel their complete focus on him rather than dismissive tolerance. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying new authority. "Humanity has also made discoveries in the Kepler 442 system, discoveries that may explain what happened to the predecessors." The chamber fell silent. Marcus activated his holographic display, showing images from the ancient facilities humanity had been studying for 2 years. The predecessor installations contained detailed records of their final days. He continued, "They faced a threat from outside our galaxy, something they called the Void Hunger. An intelligence that consumed entire star systems, converting matter and energy for purposes unknown." The holographic display showed the progression of the ancient war, system after system falling dark. As the Void Hunger swept across the galactic rim, the predecessors realized that conventional warfare was futile. The Void Hunger adapted to every strategy they employed. So they chose a different path. Thanks for watching. Marcus manipulated the display to show the scattering of predecessor populations across the galaxy. They abandoned their great cities and technological centers, hiding among primitive worlds where the Void Hunger was unlikely to search. They programmed their installations to remain dormant until their descendants were advanced enough to reclaim them and face the returning threat. Returning threat? Thane Korthak's crystalline body chimed with harmonics indicating urgent concern. "You suggest this Void Hunger still exists?" "The records indicate the threat follows a cyclical pattern," Marcus replied. "Every 50,000 years, it returns from the space between galaxies to continue its consumption. Based on astronomical observations and the timing of the predecessor's evacuation, the next incursion should begin within the next 3 years." The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began speaking simultaneously in dozens of languages. Marcus waited for the initial shock to subside before continuing. "The predecessors left us more than just historical records. They left us a weapon." The holographic display shifted to show the Genesis Protocol schematics, simplified enough for the assembled delegates to understand the basic concept. By simultaneously activating every dormant predecessor facility across the galaxy, we can implement something called the Genesis Protocol. It would fundamentally alter the physics of local space-time, making our galaxy uninhabitable for the Void Hunger, while preserving existing life. "And you propose that we simply trust these ancient records?" Commander This's forked tongue flicked skeptically. "How can we verify claims about threats that existed 50,000 years ago?" "The installations on each of your worlds contain the same records," Marcus replied. "Your own archaeologists can verify the information independently. Moreover, the predecessor early warning systems have already begun detecting anomalous readings from the galactic rim." This was only partially true. The human-controlled warning stations had been quietly activated 3 months ago and were indeed detecting unusual readings from extragalactic space. But Marcus couldn't reveal that humanity had been monitoring the situation for months without exposing their larger deception. Vexel clicked his mandibles in patterns that Marcus recognized as deep consideration. "Assuming these records are accurate, what would this Genesis Protocol require from our civilizations?" "Each major world contains a primary activation node within the predecessor installations," Marcus explained. "The protocol requires simultaneous activation from every node across the galaxy. It would demand unprecedented cooperation between all galactic species." High Chancellor Zerthok pulsed through several color patterns before speaking. "This is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. We propose that each civilization conduct detailed analysis of their local installations to verify these allegations." Marcus nodded, having expected this response. "Humanity agrees completely. We suggest a joint archaeological commission to coordinate research and share findings. Time may be limited if the threat timeline is accurate. Over the following 6 months, The galaxy's greatest minds worked to decode the predecessor records and verify the claims about the approaching void hunger. Human researchers continued their subtle guidance, ensuring that each species reached the correct conclusions while believing they had arrived at them independently. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Miranda Foster, working with the Asterian research team, made a discovery that changed everything. The predecessor installations aren't just dormant, she announced during an emergency council session. They're connected through subspace in ways we never imagined. The entire galaxy is essentially a single, massive technological system waiting for activation. Her holographic display showed the network connections between installations, revealing patterns that spanned the entire galactic disk. More importantly, she continued, the early warning systems are detecting definitive evidence of the void hunger's approach. Energy signatures matching the predecessor records are appearing at the galactic rim, moving inward at approximately 1% of light speed. The chamber filled with the various sounds that different species made when experiencing fear. Marcus felt his own heart rate increase despite knowing this moment had been carefully planned. How long until it reaches inhabited systems? Asked Commander Thys. Miranda consulted her data, though she already knew the answer. Based on current trajectory and speed, approximately 14 months until the outer rim colonies are affected, 24 months until it reaches the major civilization centers. High Chancellor Zerthok pulsed rapidly through alarm colors. Can we evacuate the outer rim? The void hunger's consumption rate accelerates as it encounters more matter to convert, Marcus replied, drawing on the genuine predecessor records. Evacuation would only delay the inevitable. The only solution is the Genesis Protocol. Thane Korthak's crystalline form rang with discordant tones. You ask us to activate ancient technology we barely understand. Based on records from a vanished civilization. In the hope of implementing a solution that has never been tested. The alternative is watching our civilizations be consumed by an intelligence that has already proven conventional weapons are useless against it, Marcus replied. The predecessors spent decades trying to find another solution. This was their final answer. The final answer, the debate continued for hours, but Marcus could see the inevitable conclusion approaching. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the evidence of the approaching threat was becoming undeniable. The early warning systems were detecting more void hunger signatures every day, and the Outer Rim research stations had begun reporting strange phenomena that matched the predecessor descriptions perfectly. Finally, High Chancellor Zerthok called for a formal vote. All in favor of implementing the Genesis Protocol coordination effort. One by one, the delegates registered their agreement. Some voted with obvious reluctance, others with resignation to an impossible situation. But they all voted yes. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror as the vote concluded. Phase 1 of their plan had succeeded beyond their best hopes. The galaxy's civilizations would work together to implement the Genesis Protocol, pooling their resources and knowledge to activate the predecessor network. But success in this phase only brought them to the edge of the real challenge. Marcus and his team still barely understood how the Genesis Protocol actually worked. They knew it would alter local physics to repel the void hunger, but the specifics remained largely mysterious even after years of study. Worse, they had discovered references in the deepest predecessor archives, suggesting that the Genesis Protocol came with a terrible cost, something the records referred to only as the price of evolution. The exact nature of this price remained unclear, but every reference suggested it would fundamentally change the species that survived its implementation. As the council session ended and the delegates began coordinating their civilization's preparation efforts, Marcus realized that humanity had successfully maneuvered the galaxy into its best chance of survival. They had also potentially doomed every species in the galaxy to an unknown transformation that their ancestors had considered preferable to extinction. In 14 months, they would discover whether the predecessors had been right. 3 days later, Marcus received an encrypted message from Dr. Elena Vasquez that made his blood run cold. Marcus, we've found the real reason the predecessors scattered. The Genesis Protocol doesn't just repel the void hunger. It changes anyone who survives it. We're not just saving the galaxy, we're ending it and beginning something completely new. Attached to the message were files that would take months to fully understand, but the basic implications were clear. The Genesis Protocol wasn't a weapon. It was an evolutionary trigger that would forcibly advance every species in the galaxy to a new stage of development. The predecessors hadn't abandoned their technology to hide from the void hunger. They had abandoned it to preserve the option of becoming something beyond their current existence when the next cycle arrived. And now humanity had committed every major species in the galaxy to the same transformation, without fully understanding what they would become. 8 months before the projected arrival of the void hunger at inhabited systems, Marcus stood in the primary control chamber of the Antarctic facility, surrounded by representatives from every major galactic civilization. The chamber had been expanded and modified to accommodate the different atmospheric and gravity requirements of the assembled delegates, creating a strange but functional environment where beings who had never trusted each other were working toward a common goal. The transformation in attitudes toward humanity had been remarkable and disturbing in equal measure. Where once Marcus had faced condescension and dismissal, he now encountered a mixture of respect, fear, and desperate hope that made him deeply uncomfortable. The other species had come to view humans as the inheritors of predecessor knowledge, the keys to galactic salvation. If only they knew how little humanity truly understood about what they were attempting. The network synchronization is at 93%. Reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, her voice steady despite the magnitude of their situation. We have confirmed activation readiness at 742 primary nodes across the galaxy. Thane Korthak's crystalline form chimed with harmonics that Marcus had learned indicated both anxiety and determination. The Zephyrian installations have integrated their power grids as instructed. Our entire civilization's energy output is now channeled through the ancient systems. Similar reports came from each delegation. The Krillian hive networks had reorganized their entire society around supporting the massive power requirements. The Vorthak military had converted every warship into a mobile power relay. The Asteri had modified their biological energy production to interface directly with predecessor biocircuits. The Thornari had grown specialized neural networks across entire continents to serve as living computational matrices. The scope of preparation was unprecedented in galactic history. Entire civilizations had restructured themselves around implementing a plan that none of them fully understood, based on the word of a species they had dismissed as primitive only 2 years earlier. Commander Thys, what is the status of the Outer Rim monitoring stations? Marcus asked. The Vorthak commander's scarred hide displayed fresh ritual markings indicating acceptance of a glorious death. All stations report contact with void hunger vanguard elements. The consumption rate matches predecessor projections exactly. We estimate 4 months until it reaches the first inhabited systems. Marcus nodded grimly. The early warning systems had been tracking the approaching threat for months now, and the reality of it exceeded even the predecessor records. The void hunger wasn't just consuming matter and energy. It was converting entire star systems into something else entirely. Something that registered on sensors as organized but fundamentally alien. Dr. Wright, have we determined the nature of the price of evolution referenced in the deepest archives? Dr. James Wright looked up from the predecessor interface he had been studying for weeks. His expression was troubled as he activated a holographic display showing genetic and consciousness mapping data. The Genesis Protocol doesn't just alter local physics, he said. It fundamentally rewrites the basic structure of matter and consciousness within the affected area. Every living being in the galaxy will be transformed at the molecular and psychic level. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Transformed into what? Asked High Chancellor Zerthok, his containment suit pulsing with colors Marcus had never seen before. Something capable of existing in the altered physics the protocol creates. Wright replied. The predecessor records suggest enhanced consciousness, expanded perception, and abilities that don't exist in our current reality. But the process is irreversible. The beings that emerge from the transformation won't be the same species that entered it. Vexhal's mandibles clicked in rapid, agitated patterns. You speak of forced evolution on a galactic scale. The elimination of our current forms of existence. The alternative is elimination by the void hunger, Marcus replied. At least this path offers survival in some form. Some form, repeated Commander Thys. You ask us to trust that whatever we become will be preferable to what we are. Marcus looked around the chamber at beings who represented the pinnacle of their respective civilizations. Warriors, scientists, philosophers, and leaders who had achieved greatness within their current limitations. The Genesis Protocol would erase all of that, replacing it with something unprecedented. The predecessors faced the same choice, he said finally. They chose transformation over extinction. There is another consideration, Elena added, consulting readouts from the deep archive systems. The transformation appears to be targeted and adaptive. The protocol analyzes each species and transforms them into something that retains their essential nature while gaining the capabilities necessary for survival in the new reality. Meaning? Prompted Thane Korthak. Meaning we won't become identical post-transformation beings, Elena explained. The Krillians will remain essentially Krillian, but enhanced beyond current limitations. The same for every species. We'll become better versions of ourselves rather than losing our identity entirely. This assurance seemed to ease some of the tension in the chamber, though Marcus noticed that several delegates still appeared deeply troubled by the implications. Dr. Miranda Foster, who had been monitoring the Outer Rim situation, suddenly straightened at her station. Marcus, we're receiving a transmission from Research Station Omega-7 on the Galactic Rim. It's unusual. Put it through. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of Dr. Sarah Kim, whom Marcus remembered from the initial Kepler 442 survey teams. But something was fundamentally different about her appearance. Her eyes held depths that seemed to extend beyond normal perception, and she moved with a fluid grace that suggested awareness of dimensions the others couldn't perceive. Marcus, Elena, if you're receiving this transmission, it means the void hunger has reached our position. Sarah's voice carried harmonics that resonated strangely in the chamber. But something extraordinary has happened. We didn't wait for the protocol activation. We conducted a localized test 3 days ago. The assembled delegates leaned forward, studying Sarah's transformed appearance with mixtures of fascination and horror. The transformation is remarkable, Sarah continued. We can perceive the underlying structure of reality in ways that were impossible before. We understand the void hunger now. It's not malevolent. It's evolutionary pressure, a test to determine which species are ready for the next stage of existence. Marcus felt cold realizations settling in his stomach. Sarah, what are you saying? The predecessors didn't flee from the void hunger. They graduated beyond its reach. The entire cycle, the consumption, the hiding, the technological preparation, it's all designed to force species toward transcendence. The void hunger only destroys civilizations that refuse or fail to evolve. The implications crashed over the assembled delegates like a wave. The threat they had been preparing to fight wasn't actually a threat at all. It was a test, a cosmic examination to determine which species were ready to join whatever the predecessors had become. The galaxy is a nursery. Sarah's enhanced voice continued. A place where species develop until they're ready for the next stage. The void hunger is the graduation ceremony. High Chancellor Zerthok pulsed through rapid color changes as he processed this revelation. Are you suggesting we have a choice other than the Genesis Protocol? Sarah's transformed features showed something that might have been compassion. You can attempt to resist the void hunger with conventional weapons, but that's essentially choosing to remain in the nursery stage indefinitely. The void hunger will keep returning until you either transcend or are eventually consumed. Or we can activate the protocol and force our evolution, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. Skip directly to the graduation ceremony. The choice is yours, Sarah replied. But I should mention that those of us who have undergone the transformation can now perceive something approaching from beyond this galaxy, something that makes the void hunger look like a gentle teacher in comparison. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Marcus looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, beings who had spent 2 years preparing for what they thought was a battle for survival, only to discover they had been preparing for an exam they never knew they were taking. Options? He asked quietly. Elena consulted her readings. We can proceed with the protocol as planned and transform every major species simultaneously. We can attempt conventional resistance and hope for a different outcome than the historical pattern suggests. Or we can do nothing and let individual worlds choose their own path as the void hunger arrives. The coordinated approach ensures survival for our civilizations, Wright added. The individual approach allows choice, but guarantees that some species will choose extinction over transformation. Commander Thys spoke first. The Vorthak have always believed that honor lies in facing impossible challenges. If evolution is the only path to survival, then we choose evolution. The Krillian Collective has already committed resources that cannot be recovered, Vexhal added. We proceed with the original plan. One by one, the other delegates reaffirmed their commitment to the Genesis Protocol, not because they fully understood what they were choosing, but because the alternative was certain destruction for those not ready to transcend on their own. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling around him. In a few hours, they would activate systems that would transform every major species in the galaxy into something beyond current understanding. They would graduate from the cosmic nursery into whatever lay beyond. Elena, initiate the final synchronization sequence, he ordered. As the ancient systems hummed to life around them, Marcus reflected on humanity's journey, from dismissed newcomers to orchestrators of galactic transformation. They had started as a species mocked for primitive survey techniques and ended as the coordinators of the largest evolutionary leap in galactic history. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity had been ridiculed for their hands-on approach to exploration, their insistence on personally visiting and examining everything they encountered. But that same approach had led them to discoveries that automated systems had missed for millennia. It had allowed them to find the truth about their heritage and prepare for a future that no purely technological civilization could have imagined. Synchronization complete, Elena announced. All networks showing green status. Genesis protocol ready for activation. Marcus looked around the chamber one final time, taking in the sight of species who had learned to work together in the face of cosmic transition. Whatever they became after the transformation, they would face it as allies rather than competitors. Begin Genesis protocol activation, he commanded. The chamber filled with light that existed in spectrums beyond normal perception as the entire galaxy began its graduation ceremony. The transformation was instantaneous and eternal, changing everything while preserving the essential nature of what had come before. When the light faded, the beings in the chamber looked the same but were fundamentally different. They could perceive dimensions that had been invisible before, understand connections that spanned the galaxy, and sense the approaching cosmic challenges that lay beyond their newly transformed reality. Marcus smiled as enhanced perception showed him the vast community of transcended species that existed beyond the galactic rim, former graduates of countless nursery galaxies who now faced challenges and opportunities that their previous existence couldn't have conceived. Humanity had kept its promise to the galaxy. They had guided their fellow species through the graduation ceremony their own ancestors had designed. And now they faced a future where being human meant something far greater than anyone could have imagined when they first reached for the stars. The galaxy had learned that the species they mocked as primitive newcomers were actually the returning inheritors of its greatest legacy. And in the process of that discovery, everyone had become something worthy of the inheritance.